The Prophet, peace be upon him, once informed the companions, there is nothing that can cause the transfer of an illness. A companion who was present objected and asked, but when we put a camel with an illness in the same enclosure as healthy camels, all of the camels end up catching the illness. The Prophet, peace be upon him, inquired, so who caused the illness in the first camel? Why was the Prophet, peace be upon him, so firm in negating the idea of contagion? Is there a justification for his approach and his methodology? And is this strict and firm approach the only approach he took in matters of the religion? You see, the message of the Prophet, peace be upon him, can be placed into two distinct categories. Firstly, sensitive matters that pertain to faith, divinity, monotheism and worship. Very, very delicate discussions that require extreme precaution. Secondly, societal matters, matters pertaining to human interactions, lifestyle choices, matters that are not so sensitive to a person's faith. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had two distinct and different approaches when dealing with these two categories: divinity and worship on one hand, and societal matters and human interactions on the other. You see, when it came to matters of divinity and worship, there was no leeway for discussion, right? No being on this earth shares in the qualities of Allah. Take the example of the spreading of contagion. Real causation belongs to Allah. And to get this confused can have detrimental implications on an individual's faith. And so the Prophet, peace be upon him, would take a very firm approach. He would begin with categorical negation. And he would remain firm on this negation, that real causation cannot belong to any being but Allah. Thereafter, he would gradually rectify this perception, and he would teach the companions that normative causation does exist. Spreading of illnesses can happen. However, they are not the primary cause. Another example to properly understand this is the visitation of graves. The Arabs would go to extremes when visiting the graves. They would become involved in acts of polytheism, such as worshipping graves, matters that are sensitive to the core tenets of faith. And so the Prophet, peace be upon him, to curb this issue, initially banned the visiting of the graves. Categorical negation, no visiting of graves, because it was an issue that was causing a crisis of faith. Thereafter, he gradually rectified this perception and taught the companions the correct method and purpose of visiting the graves. The permission to visit graves was reinstated with the objective to serve as a reminder of death. Sometimes when a problem is rife in society, it is necessary to not only apply the equal amount of opposite force, but sometimes a little more to bring true balance and equilibrium. Think of a piece of card that is folded. To bring it back to its equilibrium, it is sometimes necessary to go a little further to bring matters back into balance. We find this approach in the lives of the companions too. The great companion Abu Huraira, may Allah be pleased with him, whenever he would discuss contagion and pandemics to his students, he would always transmit the two prophetic narrations together. The first narration being, diseases are not transmitted, and the second narration being, do not bring diseased camels into contact with healthy camels. He would provide a balance. However, a time came when Abu Huraira refused to transmit the narration that negates transmission. He would only mention the narration of the camels. And he did so because in his time there was an overemphasis that he saw on divine causation at the expense of normative causation. People were becoming careless. His refusal to transmit the prophetic narration for that specific and limited period of time was an attempt to restore the balance established by the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him. This approach and methodology of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is nothing short of genius. But this was not his only approach. In other matters that would not instantly compromise the faith, and they were not as sensitive, he was much more understanding, such as the gradual progression in terms of establishing the impermissibility of alcohol. There was a gradual preparation of the companions to accept this prohibition. And so when this prohibition did arrive, they were able to comply. And so it is fair to conclude with 2 points. Firstly, the methodology in matters of faith, divinity, and belief were very firm and very direct. An instant categorical negation of the spreading of illness. Thereafter, balance was brought to that understanding. Yes, illness can spread, but only as an apparent cause. Secondly, the methodology in matters that are less sensitive. They were often executed with gradual progression, taking into consideration the realistic needs of society and their ability to conform wholeheartedly. May Allah grant us understanding. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.